it left us. It left us in a way that we didn't permit. So whenever people are bereaved, it means that they've lost something or something is taken away from them in a way that wasn't expected or wasn't permitted or wasn't allowed. And with that, it means that there is something that is valuable or someone that is valuable that has been taken away unexpectedly, usually without approval, right? And it's accompanied by great distress. So there's some distress and requires major adjustments. And it may be a loss of a loved one, relationship, or a dream property status, pet relocation, and everything. So thankfully, whatever I'm going to share with you can apply to many aspects of your life, whatever events that you go through. So far as there is a loss, and it's not your wish, it's not your will, it's not with your permission, it means that you've entered into a phase of bereavement, right? And even acknowledging that something is lost is the first step into dealing with anything that has to do with grief, right? And it is a normal human response. You know, when people are in pain, they are worried, they are sad, they are not happy with something, based because they've lost something. It's a normal human response. And it has major psychosocial and spiritual impact and adjustment. So around this time, before you realize people having all kinds of dreams, all kinds of symptoms, their relationships are not normal again. They may even question God and why this and why that, why me and why this, right? And so that period, there are major, psychosocial and biological kind of impact, spiritual impact and adjustment, right? Because things are no longer the same. And that is why these things come up, right? And the depth of bereavement or extent of bereavement is different for everybody, right? And usually, when we lose something, the impact on our lives is different. So around this time in your organization, I expect differences in response to whatever is happening, right? And the factors that influence the duration of bereavement and how people take that bereavement is based on the value of what is lost, right? So we all place different values on whatever we lose. So unfortunately, the leader who has passed all different levels of person, and because of that, some of us grieve than others. We may be more than others because our depth of on us is different, and it's okay. It's a normal human thing. So if you didn't have a good level of relationship with a person, your depth of grieving may be different. The attachment, we're all attached to different things at different times. Last time, a lady called me sobbing, wailing on the phone. And I was wondering what is happening. I thought probably the mother or someone is dead or something major. And she called me and said, the cat is dead. Right. And so I was, but it's just a cat. Why are you grieving over a cat? It is not just the cat, but the representation, the value, the depth of attachment, the level of relationship is what is dictating, the extent of grief. Right. And so you realize that when the attachment is very, very strong and the relationship is very strong, the impact is deeper. It is more profound. Right. The age of the time of loss. Right. If you look at if a child dies, it's a problem. If a middle-aged person dies, there's a problem. If an elderly person dies in their 80s, 90s, really, people still the life well, they've lived their life and all that. But if someone we don't expect to die at a certain age and suddenly they pass, the impact is greater, right? Whether it's expected or not expected. If people expect the loss, it's easy. But if it's unexpected, then the shock and the impact is greater. So, for example, if you have a parent who is in the hospital for 4 months, 6 months, and we know it's a bad case and the person is likely to die, you have taken time to adjust and understand that they are passing away. So, even if they pass away and it's painful, it may not be as painful as when you receive a call and someone is just gone, right? Or you are there and a shop you own in the market just is bent and you didn't expect that, the impact is greater. Then again, to contributory factors and reasons for the loss. If the reasons for the loss is very painful, the impact is greater. Things are normal reasons and it's even expected. then the impact is less. Then again, coping mechanisms and support systems. So if people have good support systems to go through the grieving process, it helps. But if there's no support system, that's why I'm happy for this session, right? So that this session is also part of the support system to be able to help people go through the phase properly. If there are no support system, then it creates problems. And that is why there are differences in response. There are differences. So some people, the next day they go to work, it's as though nothing has happened based on these things. Another person too at workplace will be affected significantly, and even working at work may be a bit difficult just because of whatever is happening even with the person, right? So bereavement is characterized by grieving and mourning. Grieving is more of an internal expression of what is lost. So when you are sad, you feel you can't sleep, you are anxious a bit, and you are worried a bit, and all that. Those is grieving, right? When you are sobbing and crying, and it is grieving. But mourning is the external expression of grief. So when people wear dark clothes, they sing songs and all those things, that is mourning. And it varies from culture to culture and from person to person. Right? And that's the difference between grieving and mourning. So when people are expressing how they feel, or they actually feel a certain way, it means they are grieving. Right? But all the external things that people do to express their emotions about whatever is lost, and that is mourning. Right? And there is a painful emotional adjustment. It takes time. Grieving takes time. It cannot be rushed through. It cannot be hurried along. And people take different time duration for grieving. So around this time, we expect that we allow people to be themselves. We allow people to go through the process. Because if they don't grieve well, they can end in something else. But the reason why change and grieving and mourning and all those things are important and are very difficult is because we are emotional beings. We are social beings. We form attachments. We actually we relate to people, right? And again, we want to learn. We want to grow. We want to navigate through complex things, right? We are human beings. We are people. So we feel. We relate to people, and we form attachments with those things. So whenever there is a change or a loss, it's a major thing, even for people to go through and to handle, right? And two things makes it more difficult. It makes it more, memory and emotions make things a bit more difficult because we can remember. It makes it difficult. We usually get over things that we cannot remember easily. But the things that are imprinted on our memory, it is so difficult to let go or to forget. And if anybody tells you that when you are going through pain, forgive and forget, you can forgive, but forgetting is not human. Because as part of our being human and our part of our system, we have a portion of our brain, the amygdala, the hippocampus, and those places that is responsible for our memories, right? Our memories, right? The limbic system is responsible for emotions and memory and stuff like that. And so those two things make things very, very difficult. So if someone has gone through some heartbreak, they can forgive, but to forget is not human to forget. To let go, you can let go, but the memory of it stays with you for life. But how you handle that change is important. How you navigate through that change is important for your progress. So you may not forget. You may have some emotions around it. And because we can feel, when it's painful, it is painful. We cannot deny it. When something is painful, it is painful. We cannot deny it. But to navigate through these challenges is dependent on how you respond to change. Your response to change is more important than the change itself. And change is very, very difficult because we form attachments with the things that we have to change from. And some of the things I'll talk about in a minute, right? So change will make us make progress or not. But the term change means from moving from one state to the other. And usually change is meant for improvement. So regardless of what we lose, if we handle that change well, before we realize, we become better in our systems, in who we are. We learn the lessons, we become difference in value. So for example, you go buy something at 30 cedis and you give the person 50 cedis. You say, give me my change. It actually reflects difference in value. So when people go through change well, you realize that it affects their value, right? It affects everything around them, right? So change is beneficial for appreciation in value, right? So in any work environment, anytime there is a loss, anytime there is a change, if the people in that environment take the change well, they are able to grow better. They are able to learn the lessons better. It brings more, unity and uniformity. People are able to work out things together, because during the time of grief or bereavement, we are able to think together. We are able to do things together. We are able to forgive people better. We are able to appreciate people better and stuff like that. Through the lessons that we learn from the whatever we lose, and through the example of whatever or whoever we lose, you realize that we become better and better. So change is necessary for growth for human beings. Change is a necessity for growth. When we lose things and we take it well, we are able to grow well. We are able to refocus. We actually add value to our lives when there is change, right? Painful as it may, right? It adds value. It adds some level of improvement when we take it well. So the direction of change is important, but change is very, very difficult because there is something we call our comfort zone. So we are used to a particular person, we are used to a certain system, and we are accustomed to a certain environment. And that is our comfort zone. And comfort zone is necessary for our own progress, our security, our comfort, right? And so when there is a shift from that state to something else, it becomes very, very difficult. Very, very difficult. Right now, people begin to wonder, so this person that is gone, what will happen to us? What will happen to me? This thing that I've lost, what will happen? This, what do you call it? This relationship that I've lost, what will happen? And so there is a lot of anxiety because of the uncertainties and anticipation of doom in the future, right? Then again, too, there is stress because people may feel inadequate about moving on, the adjustments that come with things, the resources that may be needed to be able to adapt to the new norm. It's very, very difficult. Very, very difficult. But whether people move on or retrogress, whether they progress or retrogress, is dependent on many things, right? It's dependent on many things. But if they retrogress, they are in all kinds of distress and disharmony, right? Because whatever was the piece now is missing. So the missing piece can actually disintegrate many things, right? For example, when a person is so valuable to some people or an organization, the person holds a lot of things together. So now that the person who is the missing piece is not there, it can destabilize many things. There is disharmony. There can be disunity. There can be disease that we term as disease, right? Because everything, has lost its connection. So, for example, in the human body, everything works in harmony. The kidneys, the liver, everything, even all the neurochemical changes and all the biochemical changes and everything is kept in a certain harmony we call equilibrium or homeostasis, right? When there is a shift in any of those things, there is disease. So whenever, there is change and it's not handled well, you realize that there is distress and disharmony. And that distress and disharmony can have, major lifelong implications if it's not taken well. And like I said earlier on, change in itself is good. Loss in itself may be painful, but loss brings certain value and improvement depending on how it is taken. So if it is taken well, change happens well and it's taken well, what will happen? There will be growth. There will be growth because lessons are learned. Things happen. And people are able to learn new things and implement many things. Again, people discover purpose when they lose things, right? They're able to rethink about life. They're able to reorganize their life in order to come up with what their goals are about life and what they want to do with their lives. When grieving goes well, change goes well. That is what will happen. Discovery of purpose, reorientation of goals and stuff like that. Again, you are able to form new relationships around people, right? During that time, people are able to discover who their friends truly are, who the people around them are. They are able to build better friendships and solid relationships. And when change is taken well, because change uncovers people, uncovers intent, uncovers relationships that are beneficial and not beneficial. So if they go through change well, before you realize, better network of people is established. Then again, people are able to plan well and reorient their goals and stuff, their objectives about life, their mission about life. They're able to plan well and do things better. So change in itself has its own benefits, right? When we lose things, when we lose people, right? That major adjustments can be very, very beneficial depending on how we go through things well, right? And so the direction of change depends on you as a person. Whether there's retrogression or there's progression is dependent on you, right? And it depends on how you think about it, how you feel about it, and how you behave about it. If your thinking is very, very good about it, if you're able to evaluate the situation and evaluate your own resources to deal with this, if you do it well, you realize that you're able to do well. You're able to take the right actions. You're able to improve. You're able to resolve issues when you're able to think about change well and you're able to grieve well, right? But if that doesn't happen, then there is problems, right? So around this time, painful as it may, our thinking are very, very important because our thinking about issues will influence how we feel about things and will determine how we behave about things, right? So the direction of change is dependent on you as a person. And that is why in an organization, when there is a loss or there is change, each one of us respond differently because we are different. We all have a certain thinking about everything differently. And that thinking and feelings about things will determine how we behave in this period of bereavement, right? And so it affects many things. It's influenced by your state as a person. Your current status as a person is important in influencing the direction of change, right? The season you may find yourself may be important. If you're already in a certain difficult time of your life, you're in a certain season of decision of your life, you're in a certain season where the person's presence or whatever is lost is very significant for that season, the impact on your life will be different. Your level of growth, for some people, based on their growth in life, it may have affected them significantly, such that now every little loss is a major loss for them, just because they may even have had traumatic events in the past. So this one only bruises the wound that is already there, right? It also depends on the decisions that you are going to take in order to resolve whatever is happening around you. So each one of us may grieve differently, may respond differently, may change differently, right? And so we need to be able to allow people to go through the phases differently because we're all unique people and we are different, right? We are very, very different, right? So there is something we call, in terms of a person's state when they are grieving, right? There's something we call the Kubler-Ross, change curve, right? Or grief curve is the same. When people are grieving, they go through various phases. And those phases, we expect that within a month, people would have actually gone through the phases successfully. Unfortunately, some people, it may get worse with time and they may even need help, right? But we expect that for every human being, within a month, all the emotional things and the turmoil and stuff should be dying down within a month. At the earlier phases of the loss, we expect all kinds of things to happen, right? But as time progresses within a month, we expect people to have gotten over it and become better and better. So the first phase of the grief, curve is what we call the phase of shock. When the things happen, the event happen and people are surprised and they're in that state of shock. Hey, this thing cannot be true, right? This thing is not happening. They are in the phase of shock. Then they go to the second phase, right? The phase of denial. Well, no, this one is not true. It cannot be happening. No, this thing cannot be happening. So they are in that phase of shock, denial, where it's just unbelievable. It's just something that cannot happen. They will be in that phase of denial. So, for example, you may have someone who come for and they are diagnosed with hypertension or cancer. They go and it's like, no, this is not happening. This is not true. And it happens with any loss, right? Then again, they go into the phase of frustration or bargaining, where now they are even frustrated. They are wondering what went wrong, what could have been done right. Could we have saved this person? God, can you reverse the situation? So the phase of what frustration and anger and bargaining, right? Where they are even bargaining with God for a reversal of situation, and where they are thinking what went wrong, who was responsible for this, what should have happened, and that kind of thing. So that is a very tumultuous kind of state where now people want to find reasoning around why things happened the way they did, and they may apportion blames. They may be angry with people and with themselves, depending on whether they thought they were responsible for it or not. Could I have been there more for this person? Could I have done this? If we had prayed more, would this have happened? If we had put these measures in place? No, so that is a bit, there's some turmoil around that time. Then they go into the phase of depression, right? Where they are sad, they feel less hopeless and stuff like that. They lose energy, they are crying more, they are more sober, socially withdrawn and stuff. It's the depressive mood where they have low energy about things. The excitement around everything may no longer be there because they are growing that phase of grief, right? But after that depressive phase, we expect that people should now be having more control over their emotions. Things should be settling down. And when things start bouncing back, when they start experimenting new things and new relationships and new systems and stuff, in order to recover from the grief period, to move on with life. And all these things are influenced by the things I've said, the depth of attachment, the reason for the loss, whether it's expected or unexpected, and all that, right? So those phases, people go through all kinds of phases, right? Then again, too, they start making decisions about way forward. Now they come and they have a more positive outlook towards life because they have overcome those negative feelings and they want to move on. They want to reintegrate back into society, into the new norm, form new attachment, new relationships, build new systems to be able to move on, right? So there is a phase of moving on where people have to move on with their lives, because they cannot be sad forever, though it's painful, but they have to move on, reintegrate. And everybody goes through the phases differently, right? And people can swing. Today they feel fine, the next day they feel terrible, the next day they are shocked, the next day they are denied it's not happening, the next day they are frustrated. People can swing. The next day they feel they have moved on, but something comes and it's a trigger and they keep crying and go back. So people can flip-flop, in between these phases. But we expect that if they are grieving well and they are recovering, we expect them that within a month, all the things should be dying down and they should be reintegrating into the new norm. That is what we expect. But if after 1 month, it's as though the wound is very fresh, it's as though things are now happening, it means that that person may need help from a professional because probably they are not grieving well, or there are other things that are influencing the extent of grieving that we need to explore and help. So people go through this, differently. Then we talk about a person's state. We are talking about how they think. When something happens to people, we expect them, whether pleasant or unpleasant, we expect them to feel a certain way, and then based on their feelings, they behave a certain way. They lose someone, they feel sad, and they may be socially withdrawn. But it is not automatic. The linkage between what happened to them and how they feel is what we call their thinking, right? So someone may go through a painful event, but they think that, oh, life goes on, things will be better. We thank God for whatever is happening. We can move on. That person, though, they will be sad, but they will not be overwhelmed. So whatever happened is not as important as they are thinking. They are thinking about themselves, the world around them and others and the future, and even about God. If that thinking is very negative, their feelings will be overly negative. If it is positive, it influences their feelings. So a person's thinking around this period is very, very, very important, right? And it influences the extent to which they grieve about. And I talked about a person's seasons in life. We are all in different seasons of our lives. So from the time they are born till they die, there are various phases. And in the workplace, you realize that majority of the people will be between the age of 19 and 65. So if someone is lost in their 40s, right, we are expecting them to live beyond 65. Or between this time, we're expecting them to live beyond 65. It may be more painful, right? Or someone who is almost pension is sacked from work. That change will not be like someone who is sacked from work at age 30 because they have more time to achieve their goals. So even the season or the period that people find themselves would be significant when it comes to grieving, right? And so we expect that people take grieving differently just based on the season they may find themselves, right? And again, we look at a person's ability to cope and adjust in terms of growth, right? There is a certain type of intelligence we call adversity quotient. Adversity quotient, because we all grow differently, right? We all grow differently, right? And we are all aging differently, right? And we expect that whilst people are aging, right, there are certain skills that they build over time. And so they build their IQ, right, ability to navigate through complex tasks. We talk about emotional intelligence. We develop emotional intelligence, EQ, ability to recognize and manage your emotions. So when someone is growing up and they did not grow up well emotionally, it affects everything happens to them. They may be overly sensitive, overly, emotional about things. So you may find people who grieve over and above just because growing up, they have emotional problems, right? So until people die, they go through various phases, right? Until they close their eyes in death and they die, right? And again, there is another form of intelligence we call AQ, adversity quotient. The intelligence that helps people able to cope, recover, and persevere. Unfortunately, a lot of people are growing up and they are not developing this type of intelligence. So the little thing, it affects them. And it is developed from childhood. The adversity quotient developed from childhood. Most of these childhood experiences and challenges is meant to build a certain kind of intelligence to navigate through difficult challenges and troubles. So sometimes, for example, two people who are married, things happen in the marriage and they may take it differently because they have different levels of this kind of intelligence. When people lose things, some people are able to bounce back quickly, others are not able to bounce back because growing up, the ability to handle things, there was some deficits in there. So whenever they are grieving, you realize that things may be very, very difficult even for them. Then SPQ is spiritual intelligence. Then we have SQ is social intelligence. So these forms of intelligence help people become functional, even as adults. But when there's some gap in their growth, you realize that their ability to cope and adjust, recover, build resilience is not there. Because of time, I will not go into all these things. But how do we respond? And that is what I'll go to end with. How do we grieve well or respond well in order to adapt well to change? What do we do? And I'm going to end because of time. What do we do? Right. So to be able to grieve well or to cope well with change, the first is you have to change how you think about things and focus more on the journey. That loss is a temporary disruption of the journey, but not the end of the journey. And so all hope is not lost because it's just a temporary disruption of the journey. So for example, if I'm going to Cape Coast and when I get to Mankesim or Kaswa, I have a flat tire. I do not abandon the journey entirely because of a flat tire. What do? I pause, I change the tire, and I move on, right? So whenever there is a challenge or a loss or change, it's only a temporary disruption of the journey. So when you focus on the long-term things, the journey ahead, you realize that there is hope. Now you'll be thankful for the person or the thing that changed, and you'll be more hopeful that, this is not the end of the world. I can move on. We can make progress. It may be painful, but there can be progress. right? So that thinking can help you grieve better and go through the grief period better. When you are not overly negative about things, but you are positive about life, you realize that you are able to make progress better. So change how you think about things, and it will help you grieve better and to heal better. The next one is to grieve well. When you feel like crying, cry. Don't say, oh, don't cry. Give the person a hanky to cry. When you feel like talking about things, verbalize it. When you feel like expression or emotions about things, do that. Because when you don't do that and you bottle everything in there, you are not, it will show up later on in something else, right? So don't be too strong to cry. It's okay to cry. Even Jesus wept. Even Jesus wept at some point. He wept twice, actually. One when his friend, Lazarus, died and realized their unbelief, he wept. Then when he was in the garden and it was a difficult time, to go to the cross, the Bible says his sweat was even like blood because the guy was grieving. He was grieving, right? So it's okay not to be strong when you've lost something. It's okay to express your emotions. It's okay to get the hanky and cry a bit. It's okay to go and hide in the washroom and cry a bit. I remember when I lost my father, sometimes I'll be with patients and I'll go to the washroom and cry a bit and come and continue my therapy session, right? It's okay because if you're a human being, grieving is part of our lives, loss is part of our lives, and it's okay to grieve at some point. And again, adapt and attempt to core needs. What it means that start adapting to the new norms and focus on the core things. You may not be overly excited about everything else, but focus on the core things and focus on your needs also. Focus on self-care. Focus on things that makes you feel better, right? Because if you don't do that, you may be overwhelmed and not be able to go through the process well. The next thing that will help is form new relationships, right? Form new relationships, relationships that are beneficial, relationships that will help you make progress, adjust to the new norm, right? And that helps. Because when we lose things and we lose people, it doesn't mean that there will be no more relationships that are beneficial. We have to explore new relationships, new ideas, new opportunities, and new things. Learning the lessons, using the lessons as a tool to be able to move on to the next phase of your life, right? So new relationships, new opportunities, new ideas, creativity, navigating a way through new challenges is necessary to grieve well. Then the God factor is important, right? He comforts the brokenhearted, right? Sometimes turning to God for comfort is important. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the God of all comforts. God is the God of all comforts. So around this time, the team may pray together, sing songs together, depend on God and all that. The God factor is very, very important. He heals the brokenhearted and binds their wounds. Very, very important. The Lord is my shepherd. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. So in the time of pain, right, in the time of trouble, God is an important source of comfort. He's the God of all comfort, who comforts us so that we'll be able to comfort others with the comfort that he comforted us with. Right, that is 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 3 and 4. Right, the God of all comfort, who comforts us. Right. Then again, to the last thing I will say is that engage the right people. Around this time, be around people who would encourage, not people who gossip, not people who would say all kinds of things, not people who would actually be negative. Because surrounding yourself with the right people would help deal with the pain and the grief period. Right. So these are some of the things that can help you, go through this phase successfully, even as individuals and as a team. And I pray that God would comfort everybody. God would progress all of us. And God would actually comfort the family. And God will lead us through this difficult time. So thank you very much for your time. I'm grateful. Thank you.
For that insightful presentation. Family, we have learned a great deal and we have the opportunity to thought and to strengthen our emotions even as we go through this moment of grief. So perhaps you do not want to speak up. Kindly drop your question, if any, in the chat box. I would be kind to read it out for Doc to respond to that. Again, if you would want to speak up, which is part of the therapy as we are learning today, why not? This is the moment. So please raise your hand virtually and I'll be glad to invite you. We have just about 5 minutes to do this as we've been briefed. Okay, there's a hand up. Dr. Adam Susu or Professor Adam Susu, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Thank you very much, Dr. Newman, for this insightful presentation. God bless you. You know, our director was so dear to us, and we are going through a difficult season. My question is on Kubler-Ross change graph. You know, what do you do when you don't seem to be moving from one stage to the other? Well, I was in shock. I was in denial. I'm frustrated. I'm depressed. And I can't move away from depression. Yesterday, we happened to go to the house to say hello to Mama D, and you could see I just can't move away from the depression. Please help me out. Thank you.
Yeah, well, like I said, every human being has the capacity to cope and adjust, and we expect within a month. So around this time, we expect all these emotions here. So if people are feeling those, it's okay. We can allow it. But if after a month, it's as though it happened just yesterday, then the person needs further assessment from a professional. So that was what I say. But around this time, everything goes. We can allow everything that happens because all of us will respond differently and the depth of response may be different, right? So we can allow it. But if after a month, things are fresh for some people and all that, then we may have to seek some professional, help with a person. And so that's my response.
Thank you very much.